My favorite reg. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one too. No, I like the privacy rule. I think it's one of the more coherent, regs. It's a really hard for the regulators to balance all the things they need to and make it easy to understand. I think the privacy rule is pretty readable. It's pretty understandable. I also think it puts a lot of power in the person whose data is at stake, and I really like that. I like the focus on the individual and on the patient in this case. That's really important. They have a lot of say in terms of where stuff goes and how, and that central point to how it's written is, I think, a really good. It's a good thing.
I said the Cures Act. Obviously, we're working through information blocking and interoperability implementation steps as we go now, and I just think it holds a lot of promise. I mean, the prospect of true interoperability, safe, secure interoperability in the way that we are maintaining the appropriate amount of privacy is amazing in what it can yield for the overall healthcare ecosystem. So I guess I just say that the Cures Act more from an optimistic perspective.
The promise of.
The promise
right?
of.
The promise
yes.
of. I think that's right.
All right. 3, go.
TEFCA. Why don't you explain what that is a little bit, and then we can sort of talk about why.
TEFCA is the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. At the end of the day, it is a framework through which information can be exchanged between a variety of different networks.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there's just both a lot of promise and a lot of uncertainty around the mechanisms about how that's going to work. And so, in terms of the thing of you can understand what it is or what the goals of it are, but then how we accomplish that, I think there's a lot to be determined, which is where
for what use cases.
Yep.
There's a lot still of unanswered questions, which is why I still have a question mark here.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the roadmap for TEFCA is still being built. So
Yeah.
I don't think we know exactly whether this is going to be as revolutionary as it could be or not, but that's why the question mark exists.
Yep. Ready? All right, I'll go first.
Okay.
The interoperability regs. I think there's a lot going on in that space generally about how data moves, and there's just so much opportunity with the stuff that's already happening there in terms of there's a lot of dollars being spent, a lot of technology being put into it. And I do think it has a lot of promise to make patients more the center of the decision making around their data. And that's the most exciting part about it is the more people do have sort of a say in what happens with their stuff, which it's theirs, they should, the better off everybody's going to be. And those regs are written in such a way that I think they're propelling us down that path in a way that's important. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That is certainly a long-term trend that I think is critically important. I think something that is maybe even a more immediate focus is the potential privacy changes around reproductive health information and the sharing associated with that. Obviously, there's been some changes in that landscape recently. And it's a political hot button, right? No matter what side you're on, there are incentives for different outcomes here. But at the end of the day, we as release of information solution providers have to be able to adjust and adapt to any direction that the regulations head, especially in situations where it's going to require us to segment portions of the data set when we're delivering records. So that's a big challenge for organizations like us and everybody in the health information management ecosystem that I think we're keeping our eye on and trying to make sure that we're at the front of the pack.
I think that's one of the benefits too of using a platform like ours is there is a lot of, they're not necessarily in conflict all the time, but there is a lot of like state and federal law that we have to deal with. I think a lot of times people don't realize how much state law goes or swirls around the movement of medical information and healthcare data generally. And in the case of the reproductive health changes, right, including the sort of, there is a proposed rule right now, particularly on this topic, the structure of the way the data is in the clinical environments, like in the EHRs, makes this challenging. And so as the state law changes and as the federal regs around how you're supposed to interact with those state laws change, there's a lot of work to be done there, and definitely having someone who's in most of the states in the country is a really good way to have a partner because we sort of see everything. So.